Hey everyone, welcome back to Dev Parkour. In this video, I want to talk about how I plan a software project. As I was making my notes for this video, I realized that this could actually be probably 3 or 4 videos. So we'll start with one at the beginning, and you'll just have to wait for the other 2 or 3 videos that I could make on this topic. Basically, what I want to dive into is how I manage kind of the dichotomy between the creative aspects of building a software project and the more engineering or left brain aspects of a software engineering project. So specifically, I'm going to talk about the approach that I took when I was building Valence. In case you're not aware, I am building a startup. Valence is a project management or ticket tracking tool specifically designed for software engineers. If you haven't seen it yet, you can go check it out at the link down in the description below. It's valence.bparks.dev. Love to have you check it out, give feedback, let me know if it works for you, and also share the pain points that you have during your software engineering process. There will be links in the video description on how to get in touch with me as well. So anyway, when I was planning Valence, I started with kind of the creative side. I had this idea, I talked to people, I heard their pain points, and I knew that there were things that I wanted to build. So step one was basically just get all of that out on paper. Now, this is really just word vomit, brain dump, however you want to describe it. The goal is to get all of your thoughts out, written down, recorded somewhere. And the important part is not just that they're recorded, so a video wouldn't really work. You want them to be able to be accessed later, searched, sorted, be able to cut and paste things around. So you really want something like a Google Doc. And that's exactly what I used. Actually, I think I used a Word doc. Either way, something that is free-form text. If you want to use something that allows you to draw, if you have a Surface, you can use like OneNote or something like that. You just need something that you can throw a bunch of stuff at the file, the document, and have it stick. If you're more of a paper and pen type person, that's fine too. Journal, a bunch of papers, whatever works for you. You just need something where you can get it all written down, typed out, drawn out, whatever, recorded. And there are a couple different aspects that I find useful to describe when I'm doing that, and we'll get to that in a little bit. The second half is more of the engineering side. So that was the creative side. Now, when it comes time for the engineering side, you need to kind of linearize things. So I find it helpful to either have a bulleted list or actually use a project management tool, use a ticket tracker, something like that. Because ultimately, as you get into actually writing code, planning what you're going to build, that sort of thing, you need to linearize it because you can't do everything at once. You really need to focus on one thing at a time, get that out, get that in front of users, get feedback, and kind of repeat this process. You want to kind of take this giant ball of spaghetti thoughts and kind of start drawing it out into, you can think of if you're drawing out a wire or something like that. You want to draw it out into this linear progression that starts to resemble the iterative software development process. Whether you're doing lean or agile or Kanban or whatever, that's a separate conversation. So what are these sorts of things that you should be thinking about when you're kind of constructing this whole spaghetti ball of creative brain dump? Everything you should start with the who and the why. So the backdrop, the canvas, the context is always who your target audience is, your target market is if you're intending to build a paid product, and why you're building it. So in my case, it was engineers. I talked to a bunch of engineers, and I wanted to solve issue tracking. So I knew that who I was talking to, and I knew the problems that I was trying to solve. I wanted to provide a tool that engineers felt actually reflected how they thought and how they worked. So with that in mind, I went to different aspects of what I would actually build. So I tend to think in terms of like data structures, data models, that sort of thing. So it's very natural to me to start designing the database, start listing out the sorts of tables that I'm going to need. So things like requests and, well, I didn't even have a concept of I was going to have requests and products and watch lists and stuff like that. I just knew that I needed some way of recording tickets, whatever that is, and then some way of organizing them into various things. That started to coalesce into the concept of watch lists as I started talking to more and more potential users, because that really fit the need. But ultimately, I just knew that I needed in the database something to track tickets, something to track aggregations of tickets, right, and those relationships between them. Another way you could think about this is going the UI route. So if you like to think in terms of what the screen's going to look like and kind of design from there, great. Start describing as a user, this is what I'll see on the screen. And from there, I will see, I'll go somewhere else and I'll see this. I'll see a list of requests with these details. I'll see a list of watch lists with these details. From a watch list, I can do certain things. You might think in terms of workflows. So as an engineer, I'm going to be doing a certain task, and these are the steps that I'm going to go through in order to accomplish that. And then finally, you could think in terms of the overall infrastructure of your application. You can think about the different layers that go into it: an API, a front end, a database, maybe a queue if something is if that works for what you're trying to build. And the goal here is really just to get all of those ideas out onto paper, because if you continue thinking about all of those ideas that you have, you're still focusing on the solution and you're not focusing on the problem. You want to get back to focusing on the problem, and that's when you start linearizing everything, you'll get back to thinking about what is the problem I'm solving, what are the things I need to do in order to test my hypotheses, and getting into the linear progression of build a thing, test the hypothesis, build a thing, test the hypothesis. And at least for me, and I would guess for many engineers, if you're thinking about, if you haven't recorded everything about what you're already thinking about when it comes to solving the problem and actually building the solution, you'll just keep thinking about how great the solution is and continuing to refine the solution in your head and keep moving further and further away from actually solving the problem. So I find this process to be super helpful. I don't dive into something like Jira right away. I start with a Word doc and just put a bunch of information there. And even now, with Valence, I am using Valence to track all of the requests that go into building Valence. I still have a Word doc. There are still some things that I think of that are just too creative. They don't have enough structure around them. And it's worth just putting them in the Word doc just so I have a place to record them. More and more, I am putting in Valence because I am designing Valence to work the way that engineers work, and that includes me. I do want Valence to encompass the entire process, and that includes both the creative aspects and the engineering aspects. Which, going back to what I said at the beginning, there are probably 3 or 4 other videos, or at least in total, that I could do about the same topic. So in a future video, we'll talk specifically about how the different phases, and I say phases loosely, but different phases of developing a project lend themselves to different thinking styles and how you can use different tools to kind of support them. And hopefully how they can all tie together, because that is the goal with Valence. I want Valence to be the place that engineers go to build products. So once you have your Word doc put together, then it's time to start linearizing the process. So start with the things that you need to do first in order to test those first hypotheses. And the goal is to come up with something like user stories is a term that you might have heard, whether you call it that or something different. The goal is to turn all of those ideas into the smallest possible piece that you could build that delivers a complete, but not necessarily comprehensive, well, it's not going to be comprehensive initially, but a complete product. Something that you could release, something that you could put in front of users, get feedback on, test those initial hypotheses, right? And at this part of the process, we're just starting to linearize. So they don't necessarily have to be the tiniest possible user story. They could just be, I want to add a request. Maybe that's tiny enough to implement right away. Maybe that's not. I think it turned out that was not really the first thing I had to do, but it's kind of the first high-level workflow that I want to think about. I'd already talked about the database. I'd designed some screens. I thought a bit about that. I'd recorded all this in a Word document, and I said, you know what? The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to let people record requests. And then I broke it down further from there. So now we're going from the who and the why to the what, and then now we're getting into the how. How am I actually going to go from I have nothing to I have something that I can put in front of users? So now it's time to start putting these user stories or workflows in order. And you want to put them in order in terms of what will get you the most information, the most feedback back. What will provide the most value to your customers right away so that you can start answering the questions that you need to answer. And if you can start with the ones that take the smallest amount of effort, that's the best place to go. You want to spend as little time as possible getting as much information as possible. All right, and with that, it's time to start building. So start with what you have identified as the minimum viable product, or it might even be pre-MVP. It might not even really be viable. It might be just enough that someone could kind of use it, even if that first user is you. In fact, I recommend that first user be you. If you're not a user of your own product, it's a bit of a struggle. You need to have that first user, and that first user should be using your product before it's even really ready, before you even really feel comfortable calling it the product, or if you're not building a product, just a software project. Yeah, and then from there, it's just an iterative process. So you'll continue to have ideas. You'll continue to think that maybe X is really cool and I should add it to my project. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't. When you have that idea, that's not the time to be vetting whether it is appropriate or not. Drop it into your Word doc or your ticket tracker, whatever you're using to capture all the creative aspects of your software project, and then start going through the rest of the process. So start refining things into workflows, and start refining those workflows into things that you'll actually accomplish, and then start organizing them in terms of what you want to do first and what will actually help you get customers giving you feedback. So there's a lot there. Hopefully that was useful and interesting to you. If it was, go ahead and hit that thumbs up button. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. I really appreciate that. I'm going to be doing a lot more videos like this, talking about my startup journey and how they apply to engineers. There are a lot of engineers out there that want to start startups. A lot of engineers have started startups. It is a very common path to starting a startup, and certainly a very possible one. You, as an engineer, you have everything you need to build a tech startup, even if you've never gone to business school, even if you've never done any sort of business training before. There are plenty of successful startup founders who are engineers without business backgrounds. So hopefully my journey is helpful to you, and if you're interested, please subscribe. If you have questions, comments, anything like that, go ahead and leave that down below. Love hearing from all of you and love responding to your comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.